Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Sarabhyaya Namaha.
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 Mukam karoti vasaram pangum langayate girim. Yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Srimad Bhagavatam class, canto number 4, chapter 13, the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Text number 40. 40. Sa Sarasanam Udyamya Mrigayur Vana Gocharaha Hanti Asadhur Mrigan Dinan Venu Asau Iti Araut Janaha Sasarasanam Udyamya
Sasarasanam Udyamya
Mrigayur Vanagocharaha Hantya Sadur Mrigan Dinan Veno Savitya Raujanaha Sasarasanam Udyamya Mrigayur Vanagocharaha Hantya Sadur Mrigan Dinan Veno Savitya Raujanaha Sasarasanam Udyamya Mrigayur Vanagocharaha Hantya Sadur Mrigan Dinan Veno Savitya Raujanaha Saha that boy of the name Vena Sarasanam his bow Udyamya taking up Mrigayuhu the hunter Vanagocharaha going into the forest Hanti used to kill Asaduhu being very cruel Mrigan deer Dinan poor Vena Asau there he is Iti thus Araut would cry Janaha all the people. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Swami Sri Prabhupada ki. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer. And as soon as he came, all the people would cry, "Here comes cruel Vena." Twice, "Here comes cruel Vena." Kind of repeat after me. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer.
kill innocent deer.
And as soon as he came,
And as soon as he came,
all the people would cry,
all the people would cry,
"Here comes cruel Vena!
"Here comes cruel Vena!
Here comes cruel Vena!
Here comes cruel Vena!"
Here he is!" Purport: Kshatriyas are allowed. Kshatriyas are allowed to hunt in the forest for the purpose of learning the killing art, not to kill animals for eating or for any other purpose. The Kshatriya kings were sometimes expected to cut off the head of a culprit in the state. For this reason, the Kshatriyas were allowed to hunt in the forest. Because this son of King Anga, Vena, was born of a bad mother, he was very cruel, and he used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill the animals. All the neighboring inhabitants would be frightened by his presence, and they would call, "Here comes Vena, here comes Vena." So from the beginning of his life, he was fearful to the citizens. Translation again: after fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer. And as soon as he came, all the people would cry, "Here comes cruel Vena, here comes cruel Vena." So according to psychology, and this is actually part of the prescribed process by which one can and should traditionally identify the nature of a young boy. That is part of one of the presentations we are making in our seminar on Vedic sociology, which basically refers to Vedic, the Vedic Varnasrama system. A very fundamental and important aspect of that culture, the Vedic culture, is for the local brahmanas to study the nature of young boys and to establish before they reach a certain age. What's your age now?
13.
13. 2 more years. By the age of 15, the Varna of an individual has to be fixed. Either Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya. And if none of those three, then Asram. Yeah. This was one of the major responsibilities actually of local brahmanas. And in this way they would clearly, we could say officially, announce. It was like known to the people in that village, regardless of which family one would be born in. Although traditionally, when the social order was more in keeping, more in line with the original system of Varna and Asrama, it was expected. It was expected that somebody born in a Brahmana family would become a Brahmana, someone in a Kshatriya family, like that. Of course, here we see this exception of Vena. Although born in a Kshatriya family by a very qualified father, King Anga. As we have read recently in the previous verses because there was something not right on the mother's side. I mean, it's not to pick on mothers or women, it could have been the reverse also. But in this case, it happened to be some defect, some lacking from previous life also. I mean, so it is something very subtle and very delicate. And therefore the need for very qualified brahmanas, isn't it, in society, who can analyze, understand, and in those days, as we have read, they could go back to previous lives, to many previous lives. And this is not the first time we hear about this in the Bhagavatam, of individuals, very qualified individuals knowing about, it's like Narada Muni himself, he speaks about his previous lives, not only one, but at least 2 lives. So, of course, the description being given here is very much in line with what we read a little earlier, how the Brahmanas could understand that because of this defect, therefore this son would be not actually qualified. So here, that is being, one example is being given of his going in the forest, and just it reminds us of, Briga the hunter that we hear about, who would, that's in the Bhagavatam. Narada Muni came upon one hunter who was only half killing animals, and upon being asked why you're killing half animals, I'm just following in parampara, my father taught me. And then of course Narada Muni instructed him, and he gave up his bow and arrow and became a fully surrendered soul. So here it mentions how, in previous days, this was one of the important activities of Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas have to, here it mentions, Prabhupada mentions in the purport that sometimes Kshatriyas had to, Prabhupada doesn't use the word decapitate, but it means cut off somebody's head. This was a very strict, we could say, policy in the Vedic culture, that if someone in the kingdom was found to be guilty of killing someone else, then it was expected that he would be killed. We read, I think recently, Prabhupada was mentioning in Kashmir, if somebody was found to steal, his hand would be cut off. So there was very little stealing going on, naturally, in that state. In our context of modern day society, this may seem like really extreme. And of course it is extreme in that it is very, it's a very direct and strong punishment. We have to look at the context. It's like in those days, there wasn't this kind of, the only kind of communication was like by word of mouth, There were no newspapers and no televisions and cell phones and whatnot. So there had to be very strong, laws had to be, laws of the state had to be implemented in a strong manner to dissuade others from actually, just like we see today, so much of bad activities, adharmic activities, practically speaking, in all the countries in the world, largely due to not not knowing about and not applying the principles of Dharma. So Kshatriyas, there's some codes. There's codes means codes refers to rules and regulations, and this was part of their training and learning to follow these different codes. Tied up. So the story will be will evolve, whereby he will grow up, of course, to be a very unqualified Kshatriya, so much so. We were reading a little earlier how his father, King Anga, became very discouraged and therefore left the kingdom before his time. Yeah. So let's continue for a few more verses, unless there's any comment or question. Text 41. Akride kridato balanna vayasyan atidarunaha prasahya nira nuk roshaha pashu matram amarayat. Translation. The boy was so cruel that while playing with young boys of his age, he would kill them. And, not only twist their arm, but he would kill them very mercilessly, as if they were animals meant for slaughter. Now that's bad behavior. He would have been sent to a juvenile delinquent's home. Text 42. Tam vichakshya kalam putram shasanair vividair indripaha yada na shasitum kalpo vrisham asti sudur manaha. A few verses here without purports. Translation to 42. After seeing the cruel and merciless behavior of his son, Vena, King Anga punished him in different ways to reform him, but was unable to bring him to the path of gentleness. He thus became greatly aggrieved. Text 43. Prayena vyarchito devo ye praja grihamedi naha kadapatya britam dukham yena vindanti durbharam. Translation. The king thought to himself, persons who have no sons are certainly fortunate. Just the opposite of what Shastra tells us. I was just reading somewhere today or yesterday how the some verses are there. The one of the important purposes for marrying is to have a son. Married life without a son is not considered complete. So the king thought to himself, persons who have no son are certainly fortunate. They must have worshipped the Lord in their previous lives so that they would not have to suffer the unbearable unhappiness caused by a bad son. Text 44. Yata papiyasi kirtir adharmascha mahan nrinam yato virodha sarvesham yata adhir anantakaha. Translation: a sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone. And this creates only endless anxiety. Purport: it is said that a married couple must have a son. Otherwise, their family life is void. But a son born without good qualities is as good as a blind eye. A blind eye has no use for seeing, but it is simply unbearably painful. The king therefore thought himself very unfortunate to have such a bad son. Text 45. Kastam praja padesham vai moha bandhanam atmanaha pandito bahu manjita yadartha kleshada griyaha. Translation: who, if he is considerate and intelligent, would desire such a worthless son? Such a son is nothing but a bond of illusion for the living entity, and he makes one's home miserable. And text 46. Yad apatyam varam manye sad apatyach chunam padat nirvidyeta gyan martyo yad klesha nivaha griyaha. Translation: purport by Srila Prabhupada. And then the king thought, a bad son is better than a bad son is better than a good son, because a good son creates an attachment for home, whereas a bad son does not. Very thoughtful king. A bad son creates a hellish home from which an intelligent man naturally becomes very easily detached. Purport: the king began to think in terms of attachment and detachment from one's material home. According to Prahlad Maharaj, the material home is compared to a blind well. If a man falls down into a blind well, it is very difficult to get out of it and begin life again. Prahlad Maharaj has advised that one give up this blind well of home life as soon as possible and go to the forest to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Vedic civilization, this giving up of home by vanaprastha and sannyas is compulsory. But people are so attached to their homes that even up to the point of death, they do not like to retire from home life. King Anga, therefore, thinking in terms of detachment, accepted his bad son as a good impetus for detachment from home life. He therefore considered his bad son his friend, since he was helping him become detached from his home. Ultimately, one has to learn how to detach oneself from attachment to material life. Therefore, if a bad son, by his bad behavior, helps a householder to go away from home, it is a boon. Yeah. So King Anga is beginning to see things through the eyes of Shastra. This is one of many examples that are there in the Bhagavatam, that when even just one individual in a family, what to speak of many families in a village, for example, or many families in a country, when they do not follow the principles of Dharma, it creates a very hellish situation. It creates anxiety. Just like people in the village, every day whenever this Vena would go to the forest, they were very fearful because maybe he'll play with their son and kill him also. He had no discrimination. So that's why Dharma is meant to be the guideline. Through Dharma, we establish ways of doing things. The more we are following these principles of Dharma, the more it creates a favorable situation to begin with in our own lives. We experience more happiness and satisfaction because that is our natural position, to be dharmic. The constitutional position of the living entity is to be engaged in the Lord's devotional service, and all of the different rules and regulations that are there in the Shastra are helping one to actually come to that platform. So I forget exactly where I was reading this also recently, how therefore traditionally in a village is considered let's say fortunate if all of the families or all the members of that village are actually following Dharma. It makes for a very wholesome, peaceful situation. You know, there's unity in that community, and there's no unnecessary enmity, there's no anxiety, and everyone is, we're looking at the Vrindavan ideal way of life, which is meant to be our prime example of how one should live in a village atmosphere. So that's what Krishna does when he descends in the material world. He displays completely, as he did 5,000 years ago, how we can live in peace and harmony. And all the members, including the animals, the cows, can be very peaceful, can be very happy. And in that kind of situation, everything flourishes, because everything is in harmony. When we are in harmony with our own self, our own spiritual self, more easily we become in harmony with others, even though it's a bit of a challenge, even though somebody may not be practicing properly or correctly the principles of Dharma, we ourselves can deal with this situation more easily. Of course, it makes for a more pleasing and pleasant situation when all the members. So that is traditionally the responsibility of Kshatriyas, of course, directed by the Brahmanas. So we have in the Bhagavatam both, we could say, good examples of individuals who were very pious from their early life, like, Prahlad Maharaj. Then we have the opposite example, like King Vena. He stands out, of course, because he was so, from a young age, displaying all of these nasty, more than nasty actually, horrific activities of, not just killing frogs, but killing his friends and whatnot. So therefore, Krishna therefore explains in the Bhagavad Gita that the different nature, these are basically the two kind of natures or mentalities in the material world, the divine and the demonic. And devotees, of course, are meant to be developing the divine nature, our spiritual nature, and the whole system of Varnasrama also, Daiva Varnasrama. Daiva Varnasrama is also meant to fully spiritualize all of the various activities that are there within the system of Varna and Asrama. So the closer we understand, the closer we follow these guidelines and these principles, then we create a more pleasing situation, pleasing atmosphere, and within that kind of situation, more easily we can practice our Krishna consciousness. So this is, of course, a challenge for in any community, and this is the challenge that we all have to take up. Here in the beginning, King Anga was completely didn't know what to do, was trying to correct his son, King Bena, became very discouraged, but then because he had been brought up in principles of Dharma, a little bit like, so many examples are there. Vidura, he also took something that was, we could say, bad for him, something bad that happened to him, and turned it into something positive. So King Anga here is contemplating on how to, in other words, even the worst of situations, if we are Krishna conscious, we can turn that into something positive. That is the potency and the power of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. For someone who is actually understanding and practicing, then there is no obstacle that one cannot actually overcome. Yeah. Any comments on this? Yes.
Here Prabhupada Maharaj said the material home is compared to blind well.
The material world, actually family life.
Family life.
Yeah, family life.
Compared to blind well, Prabhupada Maharaj said.
Yes.
But he entered in householder life. How we can understand?
but he didn't enter the blind well. Now there's two things. There's two family life. There's a blind well family life, which is called Grihamedi, isn't it? So Grihamedi is what is described in the Shastra as being a blind well, because the focus, Grihamedi means actually where the members of the family, husband and wife, to begin with, first there's husband and wife before children, they are, after, we could say, sense gratification, their activities are motivated. They might be pious, but their activities are motivated in different ways. And of course, for those who are not even pious, then it's even more, in the depths of tamagun. Dark well means ignorance, basically. People, vast majority of people in the world who are not cultivating Krishna consciousness are in this horrible kind of situation where they have to live with people they don't like, and because they have the wrong understanding, cannot establish proper relationships. And that's why in the material world, in the secular world, let's say non-devotional world, we see how there's so much of major problems in terms of separation and divorce. And it is said, for example, that in the recent, ongoing, I guess, not recent, it's ongoing, COVID-19 pandemic that we are experiencing, because of this lockdown, and therefore schools being closed, so children had to go home. And this, people who are doing social work, their telephones started ringing. People also who normally would go to work, to the office, either the husband or the wife, or in many cases nowadays both, now you have to work from home, and the kids are home. And so there was a very marked increase of all kinds of, very severe problems in terms of relationships. Husband beating the wife, children making life impossible for their parents at home, because they're not used to having the kids at home all the time. It's like at least 5 days a week they go to school. It's like, can breathe. But now when you have the kids, like 2 weeks, not 2 weeks, 2 months full, and they can't go out. And they're, generally in modern day society, because anyone, not only modern day society, anyone at any time in the history who doesn't practice spiritual life or Dharma, doesn't follow Dharma, they're uncontrolled, isn't it? Their mind is totally out of control, and they're simply after sense gratification, and then whoever is an obstacle, they become their enemy, etc., like that. So this is called Grihamedi. But there is another householder life that we refer to as Grihastha, and that is totally different. Individuals don't have to be trained to enter Grihamedi life. The less training you have, the better your Grihamedi life will be. The more hellish it will be. But in Krishna consciousness and Vedic culture, one is trained from a young age as a brahmachari and brahmacharini to become qualified to develop the different qualities before entering householder life. And that kind of marriage or householder life is what is recommended, because the focus there is service to Krishna, isn't it? So that is called Grihastha. It is Asram, isn't it? So Vedic culture is teaching us that our whole life is meant to be ashram centered. Brahmachari ashram, Grihastha ashram, Vanaprastha ashram, Sannyas ashram. So in this way, householder life is not for devotees, Grihamedi, or not men. To the extent that we follow the injunctions in the Shastra, then our life is more peaceful, more sublime. And to the extent, even as devotees, that we follow less, then some symptoms of that Grihamedi life may also come. So that is the good advantage of one having that opportunity to learn about Krishna consciousness, to prepare oneself before entering householder life. Or of course sometimes people come to Krishna consciousness after being married, but one can learn, one can take up to Krishna consciousness anytime. So great personalities like Prahlad and others, because for the vast majority, especially of Kshatriyas, for example, rare are those personalities like Bhishmadev who don't enter Grihastha life, right? Most kings, they have a queen, it's expected, natural, and it's like for 99% of the population, people are, it's natural that they enter, but they should enter, as we read from Bhagavatam. This is what Narada Muni nicely explains, isn't it, in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, and therefore those chapters that deal especially with householder life, one chapter, for example, ideal, what is the ideal family life, what is the perfect arrangement in terms of social divisions, the Varnas, what is perfect society in terms of the spiritual divisions, Asramas, what is the ideal family life, what is ideal, or who is considered like civilized, was it instructions for civilized human beings. These are all the subject matters presented by Narada Muni in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam. So therefore, we have that great fortune, that great advantage of hearing these different descriptions of both, we could say, pious and impious. Examples are there in the Bhagavatam. King Vena was a good example of a bad example, isn't it? We can learn from that when there's someone unqualified, and for how it is, what brought about this disqualification is also referred to here in terms of previous karma, like that. So therefore, every single day, it's one of the fundamental principles we learn in Krishna consciousness every single day. When we are not conscious of what we're doing, then we are creating karmic reaction, either good karma or bad karma. Nowadays, most people, they do bad karma. Because good karma means at least following what is there in the Shastra, even though it may be motivated. But the majority of people don't follow what is in the Shastra. And therefore it's very, very rare, extremely rare, to see people who are taking to the path of bhakti or devotion, where one is meant to perform activities without any kind of material expectation. And so it is not easy, because the whole of modern society is not favoring, not encouraging that. And it's the whole atmosphere of Kali Yuga, as we know, is so heavily polluted, so it makes it difficult. But by the recommended process of hearing from the Bhagavatam and practicing on a daily basis, then we have a chance, we have a good chance, very good chance of overcoming and knowing how to deal with these various obstacles that are there and avoiding to fall in the deep, dark well of family life. Any comments from our Pandit?
No question.
Huh?
Question.
Question? Yes.
Like in modern day or in modern recent history, like is there a brahmachari as guru? ISKCON or any other four Vaishnavas, something like.
You're asking whether brahmachari or guru.
Like can a brahmachari?
Can a brahmachari become guru?
No,
Is it?
recent history there. Like Prabhuji only asked.
Is that a personal question?
Like we see all the sannyasis and grihasthas there. Guru.
Kiba viprat, kiba nyasi, shudra kene noy, jai Krishna tattva veta, se guru hoy. Brahmachari is included. So, yes, anyone who knows the science of Krishna consciousness, whether one is a brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha or sannyas. So we have in our ISKCON society, of course, sannyasi gurus, we have grihastha gurus, we have, I think, probably vanaprastha gurus also. And we used to have, I don't know offhand right now, brahmachari gurus also. I mean, it's not like a 15-year-old brahmachari who will become immediately guru, but someone who's been practicing brahmachari life for many years. So there's hope for everyone. Yes, because, in ISKCON, as we know, it's not at all easy to take sannyas. So one may be thinking, my God, yeah. So I mean, even without taking sannyas, one can become. But initially one becomes automatically, actually all of us are meant to become, every single devotee actually is meant to become guru in terms of shiksha, shiksha guru. Spreading or sharing the message of Krishna consciousness to as many people as possible. Okay? Hare Krishna. Yeah. So we will close here. Jai Varnasrama Bhagavatam ki. Jai Sri Prabhupada ki. Gaur Kiranandri.